usual, I guess I say as usual because it's been 3 years now, and the crew here at Club One or Sundance Bar and Grill have been exceptional. I'm sure you can all agree with me. The food has been excellent, service has been excellent. You know, anytime we needed something, they were there, and we're going to round of applause. I think we're on. I only see one person in this, and our sound guy, so I don't know if they ever heard that, but anyway. So we're going to get going again now, and Charles Robertson is going to speak on online criminal attacks against banking accounts. It's going to be interesting. You guys are going to go away now after this, and you're going to hide your credit cards and everything, right? Here we go.
Hopefully you're all nice and relaxed now with some drinks and a little bit better. Thank you very much. This is the first time I've been to B-Sides, and it's been great. Hopefully the presentation isn't too formal. I realized how sort of relaxed it was, and I might have changed a few things, but that's okay. We'll work with what we have. Actually, I'm glad this morning though. I was debating whether I should dress up in a suit. I said no. So my name is Charles Robertson, as Robert said. I work with Verifin. Verifin is I think at this point we can say it's a very successful local company. We do software for banks and credit unions. We have, I don't know, 1,000 clients now, I guess, right around here. I know a lot of people in the crowd are actually from Verifin today, so I think it's a great opportunity for us just to get out and mix with the security community here. So what I want to talk about for the next 50 minutes or so, and throughout this talk as well, if you have questions or concerns or you want to debate the point, feel free just to chat right in. But I want to talk about some of the online attacks that are happening now against criminals. And this is some of the things that we actually look for. It's fairly wide-ranging what I'm going to look at this afternoon. Some of the things is right in the vein of what Verifin is interested in and stopping, and some things a little bit more broad. But just to give you a sense of what's happening out there. So maybe just a show of hands, who actually has, say, a bank account at a bank or a credit union? Anyone? So, Matthew says next. Yeah. All right, so that's might affect. So that's what I want to talk about might affect some of you. All right, so May 9th, 2013, so back earlier this year, so essentially the district attorney in the southern part of New York State announced that they had indicted a number of criminals in a cybercrime organization campaign. It was $45 million that had been siphoned and stolen over a short period of time. And essentially it was a cash out that took place. And so the attorney, Loretta Lynch, when she did this announcement of the indictment, said that in place of guns and masks, the cybercrime organization used laptops and the internet. So how did it go down? So, about a year ago, December 22nd, 2012, it was the first of two operations. And they call them unlimited operations. So, in the first operation, there was 4,500 transactions at terminals, ATMs. 20 countries were involved. So the organization that did this actually had people in 20 countries throughout the world. And they managed to take, in a very short period of time, you'll see it about 5 hours altogether. New York City was about 2.5 hours. And overall, they took $5 million from ATMs. So in New York City, there's a small cell of about 8 people that were involved. They did 750 transactions over 2 hours and 25 minutes, and they got $400,000. And so they just hit all these ATMs and very quickly took lots of money. So that was the first operation. That was essentially just really a setup for what they really went at on February 19th and 20th of this year. So the second unlimited operation. So it was 36,000 transactions. So it was previously 4,000, now it's 36,000. So it's just order of magnitude greater. 24 countries involved. $40 million this time. So $5 million before, $40 million this time. Over 10 hours. And in New York City this time they got $2.5 million pretty much. So 3,000 withdrawals. So they really had their act together. So these unlimited operations are, I guess it's called cyber underworld lingo. And essentially what's happened is that these operations take place. Within the organization, they get into, this case was credit card processors for two banks in the Middle East. They managed to get in, hack in, you might think they've got hundreds of cards. They're using hundreds of different cards. They actually only managed to get probably half a dozen cards. But because these were prepaid cards. They actually managed to get in. They were set up during the operation that when it rolled out, that they eliminated the withdrawal limits. So people could go to any ATM and take out as much money as that ATM would support for that card. So that's why they hit ATM after ATM after ATM. So this was captured on different video cameras at ATM terminals throughout New York City, just to give you a sense of what happened here. So this is the guy, a little bit faded out here, but so there's a picture of him early on at the beginning. So in that case, next case now he took about $2,400. Every time he took about $2,400, maybe $3,000, whatever he can get out of 2, 3, 4 cards. So he's hitting throughout all these different sites. And they're saying it's kind of interesting. At the end, you can see his backpack just growing bigger and bigger, full of cash. They also managed, I guess, in the indictment, they captured some of the images from their phones. So I really don't understand the criminals why they. I guess it's bragging rights, but it all becomes a very good piece of evidence for the police. So in the first case here, you can see 2 of the guys that were involved, and the big stack of cash that they have between them. And there's stacked cash in the bed, and there's like Gucci handbags and a Rolex watch. And so there's just lots of stuff that they bought that they took pictures of and conveniently had it there for tracking down later on and using it against them. So the cyber fraud campaign that took place, it's very sophisticated intrusion techniques that they got in. So they hacked into the system of global financial institutions. The prepaid debit card was a very small number of cards that were hacked. This data then, so the organization that was involved here took that data and they were able to spread it across the world. So 20, 24 different countries involved. They eliminated the withdrawal limits, took as much money as possible. So apparently in Japan at an ATM you can actually take out $10,000 at a time. So I think it's like $10 million came out of Japan because that's where you can get the most money in a short amount of time. So these different cells around the world, cashier cells, they made fraudulent ATM withdrawals across the world. And New York City, that's where the indictment was, so that's really where the focus is of all the people that were announced and named. There's still this huge organization out there. I'm sure that law enforcement has some idea of people who are involved, but right now we really only know about these 8 people in New York City. So it's just sort of tip of the iceberg. I know $45 million was stolen, and about $2.5 to $3 million in New York City was identified. So the question was, who was the money stolen from? So in this case, it was actually 2 banks out in the Middle East. And because these are prepaid cards, they probably ended up against, say, some corporate account. But it's really, in this case, it wasn't so much end users going out there in accounts, so much as more on the bank level. Because again, these withdrawal limits were being eliminated, so these cards were essentially being drained of funds and then reloaded automatically by the people that were in the system. So New York itself had $6 million. So I want to start with that, just to give you some sense of some of the scope of what these criminal organizations are capable of, and just how broad-reaching they can actually go, and the type of different types of skills that are actually involved. So that was, in that case, it was really the 2 banks that were involved and probably sustained the most losses. But criminal organizations are also targeting individuals, and I got a little story here. This is representative of real life, but it's not actually a real case. But I want to start with an email. So this is a question. If you can read this email, it might be a little bit too small on the screen, but we'll see. This is an email that I'd received a while back. I wonder if anyone here would like to hazard a guess as to whether this is a real email or a fake one. Well, it's a real email, but is it legitimate? If you can read it, essentially it comes down to, it says it's from the United Postal Service, then the actual subject line is, it says it's from the United Postal Service, United Package Service, UPS. There's actually the subject is the United States Postal Service. Coming to myself in Canada really didn't make a lot of sense, but they're saying that there's a package that was going to be delivered in a couple of days, and if you want some tracking information, here's the zip file. Please open the zip file and have a look at it. So I did not open it. I'm on a Mac anyway, and as we said earlier this morning, I probably had a 97.5% chance of this not actually affecting my machine, but in this case, when I look at Karen, and Karen unfortunately actually did open it. So Karen is a normal consumer. She's discovered the online convenience of online banking. So she goes online, she checks her balance, she pays bills, transfer funds, like all of us would do. So one day she finds this email in her inbox, and like a lot of people would, because she's used this courier service before, she thinks it's real, and she clicks the link. So hopefully no one here would actually click that link, but Karen does. so she assumes the link was broken or something's wrong, but it's not a big deal. It's important. They'll get back to her, and it should go from there, so no big deal. So a couple days later, her daughter comes to her, and her daughter asks for some money to borrow to catch up on some bills. And I got a 4-year-old daughter, so this hasn't yet happened to me. I don't know if I should expect this to happen. Maybe people here with older daughters or just kids in general, I suspect this happens fairly frequently, so I'll find out. So they sit down at the computer, and Karen actually transfers $1,000 into her daughter's account. So a couple days later, Karen goes and tries to buy some groceries, and she can't because her account is drained. There's no money left in her account. So she goes to the bank, and she discovers that what's happened is $6,500 has been transferred out to her account's been drained of funds. So new accounts are added to her profile. There's different ways that this can play out. I'll talk a little bit later. There's a difference between Canada and the US in terms of what we're seeing in terms of fraud and what's actually happening. In the US, this would probably be just new bill payments that were quickly added, and it's fairly easy. A lot of institutions in the US allow you to essentially add anyone as a bill payment. So you pretty much send anyone. In Canada, it's a little bit more locked down that way, but you have a lot more flexibility around, say, email transfers or prepaid credit cards. In any case, poor Karen, she's lost her money. She is told that she'll get her money back. There's a lot of consumer protections out there, so most consumers will have some protection around this type of fraud, but certainly there's a huge inconvenience. And at the end of the day, even if she does get her money back 2 months or 2 later, at that time she has trouble covering bills and whatnot, so she probably needs a line of credit. So Karen is a victim of what we call remote banking fraud, and it's an internet-enabled crime that has 3 different phases. And this is a very simplified workflow that really helps the criminals, I guess, understand how to go about doing this. So at the beginning, first thing they do is ID theft. So it's trying to get the credentials of a victim. It can be the banking credentials, and it can be just email credentials, but it's essentially getting access to their accounts. Then there's some unauthorized transfers that take place, so get the money out. And what we see is that the money doesn't actually go directly to the criminals, so the criminals don't pull it to themselves. They're at least generally that sophisticated, knowing that they can't pull it in. They also tend to be located overseas, so a lot of these criminals that are perpetrating these acts are not within Canada or the US. They're actually in Eastern Europe or Asia. So they need to facilitate that with intermediaries. And so this is what the intermediaries look like, called money mules. And that's a picture. Well, it's not a real one, but that's our depiction of a money mule. But essentially, money mules are engaged in money laundering, and they receive the funds, and then they act as they relay the funds on them to the criminals. And so they'll go to Western Union or some other, I shouldn't probably say actual names, but they go to a money services business and actually remit these funds overseas. And then from the criminal's point of view, they profit. So I want to talk about the money mules for a moment. So again, Howard is representative of money mules, and so this is poor Howard. He can't find any steady work. So he's looking for jobs. He's applied to lots of different jobs online, posted his resume, and he finally gets a job offer. He's very excited. So what the company offers him, though, is a position as what's called a financial agent. So he gets to evaluate and report on popular money service businesses. So actually try to transfer some funds, and then he reports back how well it went. So from his point of view, it looks like the training is very thorough. He understands what he has to do, his job. Everything seems well planned and organized. They're in constant communication, and it's a great job. And essentially, this is how it's going to play out. So he gets $9,000 to his bank account. That's great. So what he has to do with that then is he splits it up. He has to keep a little bit for himself as a commission. And then he takes the remaining amounts. He splits it generally into 3 chunks, less than $3,000 each. And there tends to be at least an impression, anyway, about $3,000 each. So he takes those funds, he goes to a money services business, 3 different ones, and he wires that money off to accounts that are given to him overseas. And he takes detailed notes of what everything happened in the service and all that, and he spits that as well. And the reason $3,000 is it tends to be the red flag zones where people think that above $3,000 you start getting reports and whatnot, and identification requirements. So less than $3,000 is a safe from a criminal perspective. So it seems like a simple way to make money. So he gets that job, he gets $9,000, he does the work, he submits all that information, but after he does that job, nothing else happens. He doesn't hear anything back, and eventually, in some cases, if he's unfortunate enough, his actual commission will disappear from his account as well. Setting all this up, he's actually given his account information, so his account information is also good. So once that all plays out, a week later, he then gets a call from the bank asking him to come in to discuss some of these unusual transactions involving his account. So Howard is a money mule, and he's a critical link within the organization. There's a lot of different types of mules and different ways that they can play out. He's one type of mule, and essentially he's been duped into it. A lot of times it's really willful negligence or willful. He just doesn't want to know about what he's doing, so he doesn't really think through it. What we've seen is operations, like Operation Try to Preach. This is about 3 years ago now. I think there's about $40 million stolen from this as well. There's a large chunk of cash, but essentially, again, overseas criminal organizations organized breaches of institutions, and the money mules in this case were really the critical links, and they were the vulnerable links in terms of law enforcement being able to stop this ongoing operation. In this case, a lot of these money mules were actually foreign students that actually had come over on visas into the U.S. From Eastern Europe, certain countries within Eastern Europe. And in some cases, in some organizations, the roles that these people play, they start off as a money mule, that's how they sort of get their entrance into the organization, and if they do well there, then they start moving up. So it's, for these people, I think, ultimately, in many cases, they don't really get a huge punishment for doing this. They can often claim that they don't know what they're doing, or they didn't realize what was happening, that was illegal. So we all deal in cyberspace, and certainly cyberspace has proven for criminals to be really a gold mine. They really take advantage of what's in cyberspace and look for different opportunities to profit. If you think of it from robbing an institution, robbing a bank, robbing a credit union, the online cybercrime really does give to those criminals a huge opportunity for a low-risk, high-reward type situation. So there's really little risk of getting caught and getting persecuted at this point in time, and certainly a lot of reward in terms of cash out. Versus actually, if you go into an institution now and try to rob the bank, you're likely to get no more than a few $1,000s in cash, and you're very likely to get caught. So criminals understand this, and so cybercrime has really taken off. Has anyone here been a victim of cybercrime in terms of your account's been hacked or? No? So I suspect that this room is probably not under the same order. There's lots of different ways cybercrime can play out. I suspect if this was more of a less security conscious room, that probably a larger number of people would have been affected at some point. In terms of stats, there's certainly a lot of cybercrime happening, so I would actually suspect that probably a lot more people in this room have actually been victims, just probably not fully victimized yet, certainly compromised at some level. So the stats in last year was over 500 million victims of cybercrime. Presumably some people multiple times, but 1.5 million victims per day, 18 victims per second. A lot of data breaches have been attributed to organized crime. We've seen, over the past few years, we've really seen three different trends that have accumulated in this perfect storm of cybercrime. I'll briefly talk about each in terms of data breaches, computer malware, organized cyber criminals, and I'm sure a lot of people in the room are familiar with a lot of these different aspects. But it's really been difficult in the financial services industry. In terms of data breaches, we've seen a huge number of data breaches over time. I'm going to have to turn your head to the side this one, but essentially the older data breaches are on the left, and they get more and more recent on the right. A lot of data breaches, a lot of companies that you probably recognize. Somewhere in here is Evernote. Not to necessarily flag them, but just to say that I was affected by that. I can imagine a lot of people here have been users of Evernote. And ultimately, a few months later, I received a notice from Facebook that, someone tried to enter your Facebook from Texas, and it didn't seem normal. And even though I tried to be very careful and use different username and passwords and stuff on all different sites, there's an oversight, and I ended up using the same password on Evernote and Facebook, so I almost had my Facebook account really compromised. But so I suspect that even if you try to be very careful, they're still, it's easy to slip up and still be exposed to issues. Fortunately, I don't use my Evernote password or Facebook password in my online banking account, so would not recommend that. So last year, there's at least 1,600 data breaches, which is almost a 50% increase over 2011, 134 breaches an average month, so it's just a huge number of breaches. And so I imagine pretty much everyone in this room has at some point had some of your data breached somewhere. So whether or not that's useful for criminals to actually do anything with, hopefully not. But basically, there's a few quotes from a few different sources here, but it's no longer a possibility that you'll be attacked. It's not just a probability now, it's a very near certainty. And the type of PII is actually secured during these breaches really help these criminals to perform further frauds. So a lot of these actual breaches might not give them the access to the financial funds immediately, but it might provide social security numbers or social insurance numbers, or it might provide mother maiden name or security questions or other pieces of information about each of us that can then be used for further attacks. And we really see criminals really relying on these data breaches for trying to commit further fraud. So most fraud victims are really data breach victims as well. So data breaches have been a big source of problems from a security point of view, and really helping the cyber criminals to get a step up. The second is computer malware, which I don't know if anyone here understands what computer malware is. I'm sure y'all know. But certainly, we know it's a big problem. It's continuing to grow. So McAfee Labs has a soft malware zoo that they have 128 million samples, and apparently the first quarter of this year was another, this covers up the first quarter of this year. But essentially 14 million more malware samples showed up in the first quarter of this year. So it's growing rapidly. And I imagine I'm not a huge expert on malware by any means, but I imagine a lot of these are really just constant variations on the same types of malware, that just different variations that are really getting out there. So a lot of these malware do target financial institutions. Malware shows no sign of changing its steady growth, which has been seen during the last 2 quarters. That was a report earlier this year from McAfee. So in terms of being secure in terms of browsing, you can read it's almost chopped out, not quite. So there's a little cartoon here says, "Hi, what are you doing?" Secure browsing. Interesting. Let the computer switch off. As I said, secure browsing. So ultimately, it's the only way to be very secure in browsing. So account takeovers of financial institutions are most often achieved through the use of malicious software that can point just one entry point into a network to start the theft. We see a lot of that. So malware gets on people's computers, and then their personal identifying information for accessing bank accounts is what gets stolen. So that's the second trend. That's again, the growth of malware is another huge issue that's really helping cyber criminals get foot up. The next trend is organized cyber criminals themselves. And when you think about cyber criminals, or think about organized crime in general, traditionally you might think of the mafia as coming out of Italy or New York. You have sort of the stereotypical view of what the mafia looks like, but it really has changed. So November 1989 was really the catalyst for that change, when the Berlin Wall came down, and really the opening up of formerly areas of communist Eastern Europe and Asia. Because not only did the governments switch over, a lot of the states really collapsed for a period of time. And suddenly you had, I heard, around like 16,000 people that were in the essentially the spy industry were out of work. So they were looking for new work. And they had a lot of experience in setting up black markets, extortion, theft, all this type of stuff that they had a lot of experience in. And suddenly they became available to work on their own. So that really kicked off a huge wave of crime. So what we find in terms of hackers is that just a few years ago, a lot of hackers really were working on their own out of curiosity and glory. And if you got a virus in the computer, it's really, from a hacker's point of view, they probably got a good kick out of hearing that their virus got spread to 5,000 machines, and nothing particularly serious happened necessarily. But nowadays, it really is a different ball of wax in terms of what happens around these hackers, what they do. So these cyber criminals today really do specialize. They create new markets, and they work essentially underground marketplaces. And they're very entrepreneurial in their approach. And you can tell, just again from the very first example that I talked about, it's just the scope of what they can do, just what they can pull off, and what they can coordinate is very impressive. So watch out for it. And it's all been facilitated because of the internet. And as much as the internet helped us in good ways, it helps the criminals as well in actually perpetrating the frauds. So why has cybercrime become so pervasive? And I hinted at this already. First of all, it's extremely profitable. So again, like that low risk, high reward. It's extremely profitable. Very low infrastructure costs and really be able to capture those. And I don't know if anyone here has, I imagine a lot of you have seen Ocean's 11. I haven't seen the original one, but the more recent version where essentially they're setting up to attack a casino. And in so doing, they need to be backed in order to actually get those funds to actually be able to launch that attack against the casino. It's not the case now. In order to launch an attack online, you really need very minimal infrastructure cost. In the same way that businesses now can take advantage of the cloud, take advantage of services like AWS to spin up new servers, criminals can do very much the same thing. They can spin up, they can rent services that they need. So off-the-shelf hacking, they don't need to be experts in hacking anymore. They can hide under the cloak of anonymity. And in many cases, the criminals can operate in one jurisdiction and know that they're protected, say, against American law enforcement or North American law enforcement. There's also a huge separation between the physical and virtual world, so they feel a lot safer. And these organized criminal groups can also conduct these operations without ever making physical contact with each other. So they just set up, I imagine there's probably a criminal equivalent of LinkedIn or something like that. So they probably, they network with other criminals and they can set up these organizations on the fly. So they're suddenly operating very much on a network style basis. About 70% of these members are composed of multiple nationalities. More than 30% of these are polycrime groups, so not just focused on one type of crime, they're looking at different types of areas that they can get into, conducting the crime, and very entrepreneurial. So some economies in the former Soviet Union and Central and Eastern Europe are also known as cybercrime hotspots, and Europol estimates about 3,600 of these organized crime groups active. And one very interesting spot, which I've never been to, but apparently it's a hotspot for these organized crime groups, is called Hackerville. Actually, it's not actually called Hackerville. Hackerville is probably much easier to say than for me. I think it's called Râmnicu Vâlcea. I know many Romanians are in the room who are probably cringing at my pronunciation, but it's a remote town in Romania. It is actually a sort of a district capital, county capital. About 120,000 people, so about the same size as St. John's. Essentially, internet scammers and their coworkers have really turned this into a hub of international organized crime. There's some very interesting articles out there. Wired magazine has an interesting article talking about the history of this area. And it really has become a center of e-commerce scams and malware attacks on businesses. And it's often known as essentially the Silicon Valley of online thievery. So it's really cybercrime is central. July of last year, local law enforcement and the FBI apprehended 23 hackers. And so they stole about $20 million from 1,000 Americans. But they said sometimes essentially the police are really overworked. There's only a couple officers in their online cyber fraud division. And at one point they had done a raid on a cyber cafe, went in and gathered a bunch of people, and apparently 2 hours later they went back and it was just full of war criminals. So they're in many ways fighting a losing battle. One of the citizens of Hackerville essentially says, but here what else can you do? There's no work. The government speaks only of crisis, reduction of salaries. They're 24 and during university have done nothing but sacrifice. So these people are very well educated and essentially go out. There's not a whole lot of opportunities, and cybercrime really allows them to get into line of work. In many cases, it's socially acceptable because the people they're attacking are not local. They're seen as people who live actually far away, just very baseless. So, Hackerville, it sounds like an interesting community. Apparently, actually, coming into Hackerville, you're going through the countryside. It's very rural. Some of the farms are very much run down. But suddenly, you've arrived when you start seeing like the Mercedes and BMW dealerships and stuff on the roadside of the road, and you know you've arrived. So certainly it is a big source of funds for the area. So in terms of business models, if you think of the classic business model for any enterprise, this really has been adopted by criminal enterprises as well. And the same type of organizational structures are in place. What we see is many different crime organizations. They have essentially crime as a service structure. And there's many different levels. These are probably, if you distill it down, this is probably the most raw set of levels. You have the executive suite. They really do help plan out the attacks, where things should be attacked next, and coordinate everything. You have the recruiters, which are more like middle managers. They help gather in the next level of the infantry that actually are on the ground, actually doing the work. But they do act as middle management as well. And so the executive suite ultimately, they do the planning, then we hand off a lot to the recruiters. The infantry actually do a lot of the work in terms of actually carrying out the attacks. And finally, you get the money bills, which are more on the fly. So it's a very sophisticated structure. It's very organic and mirrors in many ways standard business structures. Lots of different services for sale on the criminal underworld. Lots of different deliverables. There's consulting, advertising. You can buy programs and get customized versions of some malware. And of course, as in any service industry, if you want more product features, you want richer set of services and more complex, you pay more. So you have, again, a whole range of these organized criminal groups that are not very sophisticated, not paying a lot of money, and others are very sophisticated in their attacks. So one of the types of services that are offered are essentially hosting services. This provides essentially redirection. So if you have a computer that gets affected, one of the services that can be set up is essentially to replace inline in web pages the different types of ads that you can see. So again, I apologize, it's a little bit small. Certainly something's getting cut off, but on the left you see this is the Wall Street Journal, and on the left is a normal computer. If you're going to the Wall Street Journal, what you would see. But if the computer itself is infected, then what's happening on the computer itself is that the ads are getting intercepted, and ads from the criminal network are being shown instead. And so if you click on these ads, they might infect your computer more, might have other types of services, or might be trying to gather more personal identifiable information. But at the very least, just by viewing these ads, that's giving the criminal organizations additional revenue streams. So they'll just swap them right out. Sometimes it's hard to tell. That's very difficult to tell there that being hacked. This is an example from Amazon. It's probably a little more obvious because I'm sure Amazon would not allow third parties to have such sort of blatant ads on their site, but certainly did. So this is probably a little more obvious if you know what you're looking for. This is ESPN, I believe. So again, this is, it doesn't look great now on the right-hand side, but again, unless you know what you're looking for, you might not realize right away that you've been hacked if you're seeing these modified ads. So that's one type of service that's offered. Another is DDoS type services, and it's amazing how cheap they are. And they're available for a whole bunch of reasons. And you can go from 1 hour trying to buy $10, spend $10 to get 1 hour of DDoS on a targeted site, up to a month for $1,200. And again, depending on what you want within your DDoS, and unfortunately you can't read here, it's just kind of washed out, but depending on what your offering is, there's different tiers of service, right? So you get different additional prices. And the way this plays out in terms of financial crime is that if a high targeted business, say, has been compromised, and they know, the criminals know that now they have access to that account, they're going to try to wire out $1 million of that account. What they want to do is make sure that that business doesn't have access to the online site during the time that that wire is going to be released. So they'll put in the actual bogus wire for $1 million to wherever it's going to go. And then they'll DDoS the bank's website. So during that time, the actual legitimate owner of the site can't get in and see, to make sure to check on their financial transactions. And hopefully that DDoS stuff long enough for that wire to be released. And depending on the processes and policies of that institution, that money can actually be gone out the door before it's stopped. So this is one of the type of attacks that the criminals do. Now criminals do have a very interesting problem because criminals are dealing with each other, and because they have all these services that they're trying to buy. If you're a criminal and you're trying to buy, say, a DDoS attack from another criminal, how is that criminal going to trust you? Right? By definition, you're a criminal, so you're trying to defraud people, they're trying to get more money. So ideally, you'd like to get that DDoS service so they can pay for it, but so criminals ultimately have this big trust issue. So in stepped services like Liberty Reserve. So up until late April this year, if you went to the Liberty Reserve website, you'd have access to these services. And essentially, it was a digital currency service based out of Costa Rica, so definitely not out of the US. And over its lifetime, it allowed about 55 million transactions and about $6 billion in funds. I don't think the full $6 billion was really criminal proceeds, but certainly a large portion of it was. So before it was shut down, so you can see, again, sorry for the so washed out, but if you go there now, so you can see. The domain name has been seized. So it was shut down by the United States, even though it was based out of Costa Rica. It took longer, but the United States government, the Secret Service, was able to actually shut that down. So interestingly, there's a number of services or layers and features of Liberty Reserve that really helps preserve anonymity between criminals and help facilitate these transactions. So first of all, it wasn't Costa Rica, so it was outside U.S. law enforcement. They thought they were. There's no validation of personally identifiable information. So if you went on and set up a site, they did ask you questions of your name and your address and stuff, and you could put in anything, they didn't check it, so that was fine. In terms of actually getting money to them, so they didn't deal in cash itself, they dealt in these LR credits, Liberty Reserve credits. And so in order to get money into Liberty Reserve, you use one of these third-party exchangers, which were located throughout the world, like places like Malaysia and Russia, and a lot of places where they just didn't check. So as long as you wired money to these exchangers, then you would get credits in your account. And they actually offered an additional service, but for about 75 cents a transaction, you would actually send money to another person at Liberty Reserve, fully anonymous, so they would not even know where the money came from. So presumably you set up a transaction offline, and then you say, okay, I'll credit your account 10,000 LR credits. And then when they see that the 10,000 credits go through, they know they pay. So on May 28th, again, the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York shut them down, or at least brought forth indictment and shut them down at that time. So certainly they're not the only service like that, but it has made a difference. I think shut that down. There's a huge amount of money within the underworld has been seized right now. So another real-life example. There's lots of examples to draw upon. This is a fairly complex example, but we'll walk through it, and you can sort of see also the different layers of the organization. So we have an internet fraud ring, and they had 7 individuals who worked together in 3 different continents, and they really were trying to steal millions of dollars. So they used a number of internet-connected crimes to execute their game plan. First of all, they used phishing attacks, bogus websites. So I like that watering hole attack that was mentioned earlier. I like the term. But so these bogus websites were used to trick on witting consumers, and so people would give up their username and passwords. 7 people involved: A, B, C, D, E, F. And I'll walk through what each of those did. A, E, G were provided with stolen identifiers by B. So A, E, G were really that infantry, the lower level. B was the recruiter level. B received his information from C, who was at the top executive level. C worked with F and others to deploy phishing websites across the internet. So C and F is up there at sort of the executive recruitment level. A, B, E, G, and others then use stolen identifiers to make unauthorized withdrawals from victims' accounts, either online or in person. Some of these stolen identifiers were used to create fake driver licenses, so they could actually impersonate victims at bank branches. The scheme also used stolen identifiers to gain access to online accounts, so A, B, and G could then go in. In some cases, they'd go and look at signatures on checks, and then what they could do is actually forge checks on accounts. So certainly at the business level, so they can go in and view what checks have been deposited for the actual company. You can see a lot of checks from lots of people making these fake checks. So they also had some different variations on how the scheme played out. In some cases, C used stolen identifiers to gain access to payroll accounts to a payroll processor. Then C and others then added fake employees to victim companies' payrolls, and that caused paychecks to be issued to those fake employees. So B, C, G, and others then withdrew those fraudulent payroll amounts and used stolen identifiers and also new ones. As part of the scheme, about $300,000 on a fraudulent payroll was wired to D, and then he or she, I'm not sure which, it doesn't really matter, but they essentially impersonated a European woman who was interested in romantic relationships and duped mules into wiring the proceeds and skiing overseas. So, in some cases, the mules might not even be recruited as a job. The organized fraudery attempted to obtain about $3.5 million in fraudulent withdrawals. At the end of the day, Bank 1, Bank 2, payroll processors 3, Bank and Trust Company, they lost about $1.5 million in fraud. 27 criminal charges came through, so a lot of charges in place. So ultimately, A was convicted, B and G have been pleaded guilty and are awaiting sentencing. E is in custody. D is detained in Nigeria. Might or might not get charged. C and F are at large. Again, remember, C and F are at the top executive level, so it's very typical where you see a lot of these organizations, when it does get shut down, it's really the lower levels that get captured. And the higher levels, it's the more difficult for law enforcement to get their hands on. So it's kind of a convoluted scheme how it all sort of played out, but it does show, again, the amount of organization these criminal groups have. So, to bring it back a bit to my world more directly. So, at Verifin, my role within it is to work on remote banking fraud team. We do development around new types of fraud analytics. We do a lot of talking with customers to see what they actually see in terms of fraud and target those. So, what we've seen within Canada and the US, which is where our focus is, there's a bit of variation between the two, but there's a lot of commonalities as well. A big problem that we see right now is around electronic transfer fraud. So it's to do with automatic clearinghouse transfers in the US, Interact transfers in Canada, and wire transfers. So we do see a large issue with that. And essentially, a lot of cases, once those funds leave the institution on either of those channels, it's very difficult for those institutions to get those funds back. So at the end of the day, individuals within either individual account holders or business holders might lose the money, but oftentimes it comes down to the financial institution holding the bag and eating the losses. We also see electronic debit fraud in the US. So the automatic clearinghouse network in the US has the ability, using the ACH network, you can actually pull funds from another account. So when you do that pulling, you're supposed to have authorization, but we have some cases where accounts are hacked and those authorization does not exist. So there's concern there. ATM cash out was the example I gave at the very beginning. Prepaid credit card reloading is a big issue in Canada. We haven't seen a big issue yet in the United States around that. But basically, someone will get a prepaid credit card at some different locations. I know a few locations, I won't mention them here, but if you want to talk to me afterwards, I might not tell you. But these locations, you go there, you get these prepaid credit cards. Once you use up what's on those cards, you can actually reload them. So you can just put funds back. So if someone's account has been victimized, it's easy to go in, add a new bill payer, or bill payee, I guess, so, who you're actually going to pay in a bill, so you just add a new credit card bill payment. You reload the card from that victim's account. So that's been a big problem in Canada. Payroll modification is a big problem in the US. So a lot of companies, especially where a lot of businesses have a fair amount of money within their accounts for a short period of time, by modifying payrolls, criminals can get in and quickly siphon off large amounts of money to their accounts. So in all these cases, typically what we see is the online banking accounts have been compromised, the criminals get in that way, they set up the payments and work through the system that way. We've also heard cases now, more recently, where simply an email address is compromised. The criminals are now using those email addresses, sending information or sending emails, I guess, to the personal account holders or personal account managers at the bank branches, and requesting funds being wired to a certain location. And because it looks like it's coming from a legitimate actual customer of that bank, oftentimes they're fooled into actually, the account managers just fooled into thinking this is a legitimate request and will honor it before they realize it's not wrong. So we've been seeing a bit of that as well. So in a lot of cases, there's a lot of different ways that criminals are trying to exploit holes within the organization, within the financial institutions. So, how do we actually protect financial institutions against cyber fraud? Because we protect the financial institutions, we also protect account holders. Gartner is essentially promoting a layered security approach, which is a really good approach in this case. And from they have a number of different documents explaining this. Essentially, a layered security system affords the best protection. No single layer is sufficient to stop determined bad actors from penetrating enterprise systems. So by having a good layered security with lots of different checks and balances along the way, there's a greater probability that the criminals will be detected early and stopped before they actually, the institution will lose funds. So I'll just quickly walk through. There's 5 layers. The first one says endpoint centric. And essentially, that's securing the users, the account holders of the institution, and trying to do things to help make sure that when those account holders are setting up wire fund transfers or whatever they're doing, that they are authenticated and they are who they say they are. So things such as secure browsing with computer terminal, secure browsing, out-of-band authentication, transfer protection, verification. There's a lot of different services provided here. And the advantage for the financial institutions is that these are often the easiest types of security features to deploy. The next area is around navigation-centric. So that's a little bit deeper. So that's actually looking at what users are doing when they're online. So when they're actually navigating around, what are they doing? Looking at the section, looking at odd behaviors, looking at, essentially coming down to is looking at what they do. Is what they're doing suspicious in itself? Or is what they're doing deviating a lot from what they normally typically do? If either of those happen, then that's a good indication that something's going to be wrong. The next level is getting a little bit more deep yet. It's around user account-centric for a specific channel or specific product. So we're really looking at what's happening on that channel. So in terms of what wires are being sent, what checks are being written, what debit card transactions are happening. So for specific channels, what's happening around that user, and looking at that, monitoring it, and learning. One layer above that then is really going across multiple channels and products, and really going across one institution. So different channels will be, say, online as well as in-branch. So different ways that consumers can actually get access to their funds, different types of products that they're using within that. So just monitoring all the comprehensive look around that user's activity. And again, really, if things are out of whack for that user, the account holder, flag something within the institution. And the last level, at this point, this is difficult for anything less than a very large institution to do, but it's really entity link analysis, it's pattern-based intelligence, it's really looking at relationships between transactors. So at the very basic level, just looking at, say, where are all these funds going? If suddenly a new account's been opened and there's a lot of money going to that new account from lots of different institutions, that's something very suspicious. But even deeper, just looking at more broader networks of how accounts are held together, who's related to who, and really open up a lot of understanding around these criminal attacks. Right now, this is very difficult for anything less than a very large, major international bank to really be able to do this effectively. So, but ultimately, in terms of effectiveness, as you go to the right, you get more and more effective in terms of stopping. It tends to be easier on the left to actually to roll out some of these new services, to add two-factor authentication, for example, if it doesn't already exist, or those types of services are much easier to roll out. A lot of institutions are a little bit reluctant to do so because in many cases that actually degrades user experience. So they don't really want to make it any worse for the customers to send money. So there tends to be a bit of a battle across here in terms of what institutions will actually do. And coming up for 46 minutes, so I'm going to stop there. And I want to thank you very much for your attention today. A chance to chat with you. And before I get down, I will give you a moment to ask questions or comments or things that I haven't talked about that you're So the question is around virtual currencies. That's a really good question, actually. In terms of our target market, who we see, it hasn't happened to us yet, but I'm sure it's going to play out. I know there's been a lot of reports over time in the media about people's wallets getting stolen, Bitcoin wallets getting stolen, and a lot of these different services have been shut down or hacked or compromised. So I'm sure they're a huge target as well. Certainly from an anonymity point of view, I know there's we had a lot of discussion today around privacy and security and stuff, and that's a very important sensitive area, but from a criminal point of view, security and anonymity and stuff is also extremely important. It's from where we sit as companies, it's a bit of a tug of war because ultimately, the more insight you get into the criminal element of what they're doing, the better it is to be able to stop them. Right? So, yeah.
Just a simple question. Obviously, we know that the fraud is happening to these financial institutions. Why is it that most financial institutions for bank cards only have a 4-digit PIN?
I'd say it's for convenience rather than real emphasis on security. So it's, yeah, that's a good question. And it's, at the end of the day, it's, yeah, I don't know. Anyone?
To me, when you went through the levels of protection,
Yeah.
that is like farthest left you can go. That should be easy.
Yeah, it's. Well, I'll tell you what's interesting. I found, and I don't know who is anyone here from the U.S. So okay, so you might not realize this, but in the United States, most debit cards now in the U.S. are backed by Mastercard and Visa, one of the big names, and so you can use your debit card the same way you use your credit card, right? But they're backed by a debit account, right, as opposed to a credit account. So you can actually just take your debit card and go into any store in the United States and swipe the card and sign for a transaction that's coming out of your debit account. So you don't even need a PIN to do transactions. So that just kind of blows my mind that you can just sign for it. So, yeah, it comes down. I think ultimately though, in terms of the cards being stolen, some of it we haven't seen a lot of that recently in terms of. You still get sometimes where people's cards are stolen and people use their birth date or something like that as a PIN. More what happens is around devices get compromised, and so when people just put the cards in, it happens more with the swipe, not so much B2B, but you swipe your card, you punch your PIN in, all that information is getting captured, and there's enough information there to actually create clone cards that people can then go out and risk off on this.
But would it be ultimately what you described here today are people's online passwords and then through internet banking plans, so not so much about the card itself, it's all the automated banking they have to money.
Yeah, in terms of the online side of things, yeah, it's the online credentials. If you have a virus in your machine, then your username and password. Yeah, it doesn't matter how long your password is getting compromised, it's stolen. And the viruses, the malware is so sophisticated in terms of what it can do. Sometimes you don't even know it's there. You set up to do one type of transaction and it just totally overwrites behind the scenes and does a different transaction on your behalf. So, that tends to be the bigger area that we're concerned about right now. But yeah, criminals will exploit whatever they can, and if they can get online data breaches and get card information that way, then do online card transactions, then they'll do that as well. So. Right. Oh. So the question was around aggregators of bank accounts, and I haven't heard anything like that. I'm sure they're a big target. I haven't heard of any data breaches on their side. Other than I'm sure, again, if people are reusing usernames and passwords, that might be a target that way. So.
This is related actually. Have you heard of Square's new service that launched it, I think, yesterday?
Just briefly, yeah.
It's plugged into email. You email the person you want to transfer money to, hook up your debit account straight into your email account, and you put the amount you want to send them to in the subject line, and you CC this Square service fix. And it just takes money straight into the account for all the addition after that.
Yeah, apparently it's such a new service that Square has. Apparently they send an email back to confirm. So, yeah, otherwise it'd be very dangerous. But yeah, they send an email back to confirm. I haven't read the real details around that yet, so I don't know how secure. My first impression was, but I think, I'm sure they thought through a lot of those issues in terms of being secure. So it'd be interesting to find out more about that. knows around where things are going, and yeah, certainly online wallets and stuff. Yeah, I'm not even sure at this point because it's ground is shifting so much. It's from our perspective, what we see in the U.S. is that the financial services industry is a lot different in Canada. So in Canada, we have 5 or 6 big banks and a number of smaller players, but probably about 15 institutions on the banking side, a few hundred in terms of credit unions. The U.S. is about 7,000 banks. It's just a huge number of banks within the United States. A lot of these are very, very small institutions, and I'm sure they're going to be squeezed by some of these new types of technologies. Just not from a regulatory point of view, but also from a fraud point of view, and sort of, yeah, I'm not sure where things are going right now, but certainly I'm sure the criminals are looking at all these different opportunities. Right. Oh, yes, one more.
What are your thoughts on the fact that the email, the person's email address are basically the single point of failure for everything that they control? And how can we help make sure our emails are really most secure? Maybe we can't get some emails we get essentially.
Yeah, it's a good question around emails and being the biggest single point of failure. Yeah, I don't think people realize just how much information or how that can be utilized by criminals in so many ways. And people really do need to take the next steps, really trying to make sure that their online communications or emails are secure. I know Google has some services available as well in terms of two-factor authentication and whatnot. So I would encourage people to take advantage of that because if criminals get into your email account, there's so much access that they have. They're looking for any communication that you've had with a financial institution. If you bought a house in the last little while or opened accounts, you've probably done some email communication with that institution. So one thing that's good is some institutions do have their own secure email system. So if you're actually trying to communicate financial information, you have to log into their own communication portal, which I think is important as well. I certainly know from some of the attacks we've heard about that it's going through.
E-savings, right?
Yeah, it's our savings. Yeah.
And what about why don't banks have two-factor? Like I've never seen a bank with two-factor. I know the emails send point of failure, but still, the bank provide two-factor. I've never seen, but it always seems to me banks have the worst security. The passwords are always hard, super weak. You can't use special characters or applications. They always seem to.
Yeah.
I don't understand.
What we found is, a lot of institutions will require two-factor authentication or multi-stage authentication for their business customers. Right? That's where you see it, not so much on the consumer side. And I know a lot of the institutions are concerned because they end up using off-the-shelf platforms that they're not creating their own websites. They're buying third-party sites that get rebranded. And I know they're concerned sometimes with some of the features that get rolled out. Because you have different. As any organization, a lot of banks are fairly large, and they have people on one side that really want to push out these new features so they get new customers, and security is not top of mind at all. And when you talk to the security side of the banks, they're just very concerned about some of the features that can get rolled out without necessarily having all pieces in place for security. So, again, that's where it comes back to, I think, it's multiple layers as well. So even if you don't have necessarily all the pieces in place on the left-hand side, the real power comes in when you start looking at monitoring customer accounts. And if you as a customer have never done wires before, never done interact email transfers before, or whatever you do, and something that's showing up in your account for large sums of money, that should trigger alerts within the institution that they should dig deeper, try to give you a call back or something like that. Which is a lot of institutions are doing that now. All right. Oh. So in terms of the line between convenience and security, that's a good question. I don't know ultimately where to say. I mean, from a personal point of view, I'd like to see a lot more security around the institutions. I'd like to see them requiring a lot more steps opt through to actually send money and do things like that. A lot of people are not savvy enough or understanding enough of that, like just from a consumer point of view. So I think there needs to be a sort of a reasonable level of requirements and education that we have from institutions requiring those customers to go through sort of basic level steps. I think basically what a lot of institutions have now are just sort of just the basics, just the bare minimum of what's required. And from our point of view, it's really stepping up for the institutions. They step up monitoring on the back end of what actually goes, what actually happens. Before money actually leaves your account to go somewhere else, if it's actually looked at closely and doesn't fit your profile, doesn't fit what you're doing, and fits kind of profile of what criminals would do, that's where the real power comes in. And the more that we can work on the back end to really help facilitate that, that's the real power of institutions. All right, thank you very much.
Well, thanks very much, Charles. It's nice to see that talk generated a lot of questions.